Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into a place that's both, intriguing and infamous, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Lizzie Borden House.
Absolutely.
In Fall River, Massachusetts. The site, as I'm sure you all know, of the unsolved double murder of Andrew and Abby Borden way back in 1892. But we're not here to rehash the gory details.
No.
Or try to solve this age-old mystery, right?
Okay.
We're digging into the house itself.
Yeah.
Its history, its quirks, and how it went from a family home to, well, a pretty captivating landmark, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it really is like a time capsule in a lot of ways. It reflects not just the Bordens, but just, life back then in the late 19th century.
Totally. It's like a window into another era. Let's start with Andrew Borden, Lizzie's dad. You'd think, okay, successful businessman, bank president.
Right.
He'd have like a top-of-the-line house for the time.
You would think. But what we found is that Andrew was kind of a man of contradictions, because despite his wealth, the house, it didn't even have indoor plumbing.
Really?
Or electricity.
Wow.
Which was, becoming more and more common even back then, especially for, wealthy families.
It's wild to think that somebody, in his position would choose to live, with an outhouse and chamber pots under the beds?
Yeah, a two-stall privy, that's what they called it.
A two-stall privy, okay. It really makes you wonder about his, priorities, right?
Yeah, maybe it was how he was raised, or maybe he wanted to seem really practical and careful with money,
Right.
Some people even said he thought all those newfangled inventions were just frivolous, a waste of money.
I can see that. I build my own fortune. I don't need all that fancy stuff.
Exactly.
But it is a big contrast to, the way some of Lizzie's friends lived. There are stories about her not wanting to have people over to the house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you can imagine, being a young woman and being like, my house isn't as nice as my wealthy friends' houses. Kind of makes you self-conscious,
Oh, absolutely. It adds another layer to the whole story, right? Trying to, fit in with high society, but living in a house that doesn't really match out.
Totally, totally. And, after Lizzie was acquitted, she inherited the house, but she decided to move to a fancier place called Maplecroft. It seems like she needed a fresh start.
Yeah.
To get away from everything that happened there.
It makes sense. That house probably held so many tough memories for her. Moving could have been her way of trying to, rebuild her life, even with all the rumors and everything still hanging over her.
For sure. So what happened to the house after Lizzie moved out?
Well, it was sold in 1948.
Okay.
And then get this, in 1996, it became a bed and breakfast.
A bed and breakfast.
A bed and breakfast. It's changed hands a few times since then. Most recently, in 2021, it was bought by Lance Sowell.
So the house has really taken on a life of its own, separate from the Bordens, even.
Absolutely. And here's the kicker. The room where Abby Borden was murdered. That's the most requested room by guests.
Really?
It's crazy, right? People are drawn to that morbid curiosity.
I get it, though. It's like you want to touch a piece of history, even if it's, a tragic piece.
For sure. It's like this need to connect with historical events. Even the really bad ones.
Totally. And speaking of experiencing history, the tours of the house, they've changed a lot over the years.
How so?
Well, they used to just stick to the facts of the case, just the basics.
Uh-huh.
But now they've added some, more dramatic stuff.
Like what?
They have, mannequins in the guest room and even autopsy photos on the dining room table.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a little intense.
It kind of makes you think, are they more focused on being accurate, or are they just trying to make it like a show?
Right. Are they trying to attract more people by making it more sensational,
Yeah, it's a tough question. Where do you draw the line between teaching people about history and entertaining them, especially with a story like this?
It's a tricky balance. And they even have a Ouija board for guests to use, which plays right into the whole, the house is haunted thing.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely fun for some people, but it's important to be a little skeptical about all that, Like Joe Nickell, he's a famous paranormal investigator. He actually went to the house and debunked a lot of the ghost stories.
Really?
Yeah, he explained things like, how tables move on their own. It's this thing called the ideomotor effect.
The ideomotor effect?
Yeah, it's where your muscles move without you even realizing it because of what you're thinking.
Oh, so if you think the table's going to move, your subconscious makes it move.
Exactly. So maybe it's not ghosts, but just our own minds messing with us.
That's fascinating. But it is interesting how these ideas, the ghost stories and stuff, they just keep adding to the mystery of the Lizzie Borden house. So where does the house go from here? Well, Lance Sowell, the current owner, he's got some big plans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, big plans.
What's he thinking?
He's also known for his work on the TV show, what is it called? Ghost Adventures.
Ghost Adventures, yeah.
Ghost Adventures. And he wants to, like, expand the whole Lizzie Borden House experience. He's thinking bus tours, podcasts, maybe even themed dinners.
Wow.
Yeah. And get this, a wedding venue.
A wedding at the Lizzie Borden House.
Yeah, I know, right? It's definitely unique. He seems to be embracing the house's, infamy, while also wanting to preserve its history, which is cool.
Yeah, it's a good approach. He wants to keep the original furniture and decor, keep it authentic.
Yeah, although he is taking out that old iron stove.
Oh, right, for safety reasons.
Yeah, which makes sense, but it makes you think about, the challenges of keeping these old places safe and up to code while also trying to, like, preserve them as they were.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough balance.
But while Zal's figuring all that out, the house has already become a pop culture icon. I mean, it's been in shows like Supernatural, BuzzFeed Unsolved, even video games like Fallout 4.
It's wild how the Lizzie Borden story just keeps capturing our imaginations. Even after all these years, it still makes people curious, and they're still debating what really happened. It's this mix of fact, speculation, and entertainment, all rolled into one.
It really shows you that even seemingly normal places can have these amazing stories behind them, just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it just shows how interested we are in, the darker side of things, the mysteries and the macabre. Like, why are we so drawn to those parts of history?
I know, right? It's like we can't resist those unsolved puzzles, the glimpses into the unknown. And speaking of the unknown, the Lizzie Borden house has a big reputation for, well, being haunted. Do you buy into any of that?
It's easy to get caught up in all those stories about ghosts, right? But I think it's really important to be, skeptical. A lot of those so-called paranormal events, they actually have pretty normal explanations. Remember the ideomotor effect we were talking about?
Oh, yeah, right. Remind me how that works again.
Sure. So basically, it's this thing where what you're thinking can actually make your muscles move without you even realizing it.
Okay.
So let's say you're using a Ouija board, right? And you're already expecting it to move. Well, your subconscious mind might actually be making the planchette move, spelling out words or whatever, without you consciously doing it.
So it's not really ghosts talking, but more like our own minds playing tricks on us.
Exactly. What we believe and what we expect to see can really affect how we experience things. I'm not saying that every single paranormal thing is fake, but it's good to think about those explanations, the psychological and scientific ones, before jumping to conclusions about ghosts.
That's a good point. It's like that saying, extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence, right? We've got to be critical thinkers, especially when it comes to the paranormal. But let's get back to Lance Saval and what he wants to do with the house. It sounds like he's trying to keep the history alive, but also tap into people's interest in the creepier side of things.
He's got a tough job, that's for sure. He wants to preserve the history, right? Keep the original furniture and decor, all that. But at the same time, he's adding things like ghost tours and themed dinners, things that play up the mystery.
It's like he's creating a bunch of different layers to the experience. There's the historical layer, the facts of the case and the Borden family, and then there's the layer of mystery and speculation, for the people who love the paranormal and the unsolved parts of the story.
That's smart, actually. It means he can appeal to more people, to those interested in history and those who like the more sensational side of things.
And let's be real, the Lizzie Borden house is way more than just a historical site. It's become part of pop culture. It's in TV shows, movies, even video games.
Totally. I mean, it's in everything. Supernatural, BuzzFeed Unsolved, even Fallout 4. People are just fascinated by the case, by these unsolved true crime stories. We want to understand why people do these terrible things, to figure out the dark side of human nature.
It just goes to show that sometimes the best stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers. But speaking of questions, I want to bring this back to our listeners. Think about everything we've talked about. The history of the house, the tours, the ghost stories, and Zal's plans.
Here's the question. Would you spend the night in that most requested room at the Lizzie Borden house?
It's not just about being curious, is it? It's about facing our relationship with history, with the unknown, maybe even with our own fears.
It's about exploring those parts of history that make us uncomfortable, where the past and the present kind of blend together, and where we have to question what we believe is true.
It's like a journey into the heart of a mystery that, even after all these years, we're still trying to figure out. Yeah, it's a story that just keeps going, doesn't it? Pulling us in with all its twists and turns, from the Borden's family drama to the trial to what it is now, this tourist spot that's like a mix of history and, well, a bit of spooky fun.
It really shows how history isn't like set in stone. We're always looking back at it through today's lens, our perspectives and what we're interested in now. All of that changes how we see the past.
I think that's part of what makes the Lizzie Borden House so fascinating, right? It's not just a museum piece. It's like this living thing, changing all the time. Every visitor, every researcher, everyone who sleeps there, they all add to its story.
Yeah, the lines between what's real and what's made up, they kind of blur together there. You got the echoes of the past, the whispers of the present, and then our own ideas about what happened all mixed in. It's really something.
It makes you think some of the best stories are the ones that don't have all the answers, right? The ones that make us dig deeper, explore the shadows, try to make sense of these mysteries that might never be solved.
It's about accepting that we might not ever know everything, but there's something satisfying about trying to learn. Putting the pieces together, even if the puzzle's never complete.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Lizzie Borden house, here's what we want you to take away. It's more than just a crime scene. It reflects how times change, how our views shift, and how powerful a story can be even after all these years. Thanks for exploring with us today.